I have a comment and also a couple of questions. First off, comment-wise, I agree that there's a PM10 issue for that region. And I think that it's very important that you guys identify the proper sources and that you're able to do some type of program to help people's health down there. I think it's very important for many, especially when you get into retired people, or as we're seeing now with COVID, people that have some kind of a pre-existing health condition. My concerns, though, is just how this whole process has gone. I'm not going to go all into that right now. I'm going to be specific. Test sites. I'm looking at a couple of test sites here, and I just was wondering if you guys have any desire or plan to add an additional test site that would be east or downwind of the cement plant, the Alliance cement plant, and that would be parallel to the two existing sites, the one at the beach that we just saw the example of, and also the site at the CDF site. So if you draw a straight line, it pretty much goes right past the cement plant, and there's opportunity for a couple of spots prior to the Tacoma Mesa development. So I've looked at that at a couple of times on maps, and I was wondering if that's something that has been considered by the APCD.
No, it's not anything that we've considered or have any plans to do.
Okay, so then my next question is I searched high and low and everywhere on the internet for a permit from the APCD for Alliance Cement Plant, and I was not able to find one. Now, as far as I know, isn't it a requirement within the state that they're supposed to have some type of a permit? Because what I know is that and this is just, I'm far from an expert, I just know what I've researched, is that Portland cement plants typically have high PM10 emissions, and they also have items such as silica and stuff like that in it. And to me, when I look at this area, based on the science we're seeing coming out on the OHV park site and what kind of information is coming forth, and also my knowledge of the modeling that's been done that was flawed, and also where we're at right now where it's costing people a lot of money, it just seems to me that, you know, it's getting to the point where you guys should be looking at additional sources down there. And like I said, I didn't find a permit or anything on the cement plant when I searched on the internet. I was wondering if you knew if there was anything like that. And if you don't, who would be the person I could contact to be able to get that information?
Yeah, sure. So off the top of my head, I don't know if that facility has a permit or not, and I'm not involved in the permitting of such things, so I don't know if it would be required to have a permit. Our permits are typically not posted online, so it's not surprising that you wouldn't be able to find that permit or any other permit online. But you could certainly send a public information request to the district, or even just email us at our general inquiries from the public email address, which I believe is info@slocleanair.com, but I'm not 100% sure. You can find that on our website. So that answers that question. But I'll also say the cement plant, when we see the high PM10 levels, it's only when the wind is blowing from the direction of the ODSVRA, and that cement plant is not in between the ODSVRA and our monitors. So even if it is emitting a lot of PM10 into the air, our monitors wouldn't be picking it up during the wind-blown dust events.
No, I understand what you're saying, but I mean, just that statement there sounds extremely, when you look at it from afar, which as commissioners, that's what we have to do, we take a 30,000-foot view. I mean, basically, you guys are focusing solely on one source when it's known that Portland cement facilities are extremely high in particulate matter emissions, and also that they have silica and other items in them that have proven health issues, where we just saw a report that on the PM 2.5, which once again, I'm not an expert here, but I'm just trying to be educated, is as far as I understand, dust particles are smaller, so they're going to be more on the 2.5 side of life, and the grain like sand and bigger items are going to be more on the PM10. So when we're talking dust, to be specific here, we're looking at finer items. The finer items are the ones that could have the biggest health impacts. And so, as looking at this one to start with, I agree with you guys. You have a particulate matter issue down there, but the other side of this is that it seems to be like you're ignoring a possible significant source of health destructive PM materials, and you're spending a whole bunch of time on a site that's proven to be a lot of the stuff's organic, and that according to the report we just saw, there was no real items in the black column on the graphs that were known health issue, particulate matter. So I just wanted to, I encourage us to continue working together on those levels, but I think as an organization, as a government agency, you guys owe it to those people down there. And I've said this before, those houses that were built up in there, that was irresponsible to plan and zone that the way it was. And it was irresponsible to cut down the trees, and it was irresponsible to do a lot of things that were old style mitigation programs. So going forward, I think it's going to be important for you guys to have as much technology as possible and really try to bear down and get the sources that could be causing the health issues, not just the issues that are politically sensitive. So
can I respond to some of that?
Yeah, certainly you can respond to anything. I mean, that's why we like having you part of this process.
Okay, great, thank you. I think, this is not a new problem. This is not like we just started investigating this. We've identified that there was a PM10 problem on the Mesa in the early 2000s. And our first major study, which was conducted in 2004 and 2005, was really to determine where it was coming from. We thought maybe it's the dunes. There's a big oil refinery there that had big piles of open coke. We thought maybe it's the refinery. We thought maybe it's dirt roads. Maybe there's something going on. And so that first study, which was conducted in the early 2000s and it was published in 2007, is where we really narrowed in on the dunes. And even at that point, we hadn't concluded whether it was just natural from the dunes, from the sands that's there, or if OHV activity had anything to do with it. So this has been a long time coming, over 15 years, to reach where our understanding that we have today. And I'll also say on the Mesa, that's probably the most densely monitored area, certainly in California, possibly in the country, for particulate matter. We've got regulatory grade instruments at a number of sites within a very small area there. We've got 4 permanent sites and a number of temporary sites, and since that initial study, we've done 2 major studies in the area as well. So I think we know pretty well that the source of the PM10 is coming from the Oceano dunes. Now, what I don't mean to speak for Dr. Russell, but I think what her study is trying to determine is that coming from the sand? Is it coming from the ocean? What are the chemical constituents of that dust? But even, again, I don't mean to speak for Dr. Russell, but even her study seems to presuppose that it is coming from the dunes. I don't think there's really a question of, is this coming from the dunes or is this coming from some other source? And I'll also say, these instruments are measuring particulate 24 hours a day. So if the cement plant is throwing up lots of PM10, then when the direction of the wind happens to be blowing from the cement plant towards one of these monitors, we would see that. And again, at this point, we don't have any evidence that the cement plant is causing a problem.
Yeah, because you guys aren't monitoring it, and there's any monitors you have are on the other side of the wind when it's doing its traditional blowing. And just so you know, I mean, I've mentioned this before at meetings, but my family has had over 100-year run of ranches on the Sonoma County coast and the Sonoma Marin coast, and sits above, has a couple of ranches that sit right above a large sand dune structure. So I'm quite familiar with the wind blowing every afternoon and having sand being on the windshield of my vehicle whenever I visit my relatives. So I understand how that process works. But I'm just, like I said, I'm just concerned. I think that you guys have blinders on, and I think to be a smart aleck, I think you guys are kind of getting a little addicted to OHV money. So I'm going to move on from there and go to Professor Rust. I wanted to go back to the on your graph. You showed that there was no black in the graph. I took a photo of it with my phone, so we're not really getting much in the way of like emissions from vehicles, like tailpipe type emissions in the testing.
Unfortunately, no, we didn't measure for that.
Okay.
So my green section that I called other included everything we didn't spend the resources to measure for, which included black carbon, ammonium, and nitrate.
Okay.
We do from May have some sulfate and some organic measurements that I simply haven't had time to include at this point.
Okay.
That will be broken down a little bit, but because our task was not to do a full chemical apportionment, which costs more, we didn't include that.
Well, it'd be nice to see if the APCD would partner with you guys and maybe look at that. Maybe they could fund part of that, because you know, obviously with the road being right next to the CDF site, I was kind of surprised with that train tracks, the industrial traffic, and stuff that goes to the refinery. I kind of was surprised not to see anything there. So that makes sense. That's understanding.
And we do, from our prior 2019 measurements, have from the organic fraction, which even though it sounds like it's biological, the organic fraction includes some combustion emissions, which tend to polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons. And we did see chemical signatures for combustion, which is most likely motor vehicle traffic, although it could also be refineries and power plants.
Gotcha. Well, it would be nice to see that information come forth. I hope you guys can secure the funding and be able to get that, because I think it'd be beneficial. And then the last thing is I alluded to earlier about the size of dust particles. Now, you're a professor on this and far more knowledgeable than I am. So, is it correct, what I've read, that dust is a smaller, finer particle, more like a silt type particle, where larger grains like the PM10 size can be more granule, like sand and things along those lines? Or am I incorrect there?
Terminology is a tough thing because different people use it different ways. In this report, I was using dust to imply mineral dust, so its chemical component, and it can appear in a range of sizes. But you're certainly right that there is a range of sizes, and on the high end, it's the sand we step on the beach that we can see and touch. On the low end, it's the part that's mechanically broken down from that. So it's a spectrum. Does that address your question?
Oh yes, no, absolutely. And also, and then some of the low end stuff also could be the emissions coming from the Pacific Ocean.
Yes, that's the key, is that we don't know that either the PM10 or the PM2.5 is 100% dust. In fact, we know it's not. There's very few places in the world where that would be true. Antarctica may be one of them in some seasons. But the PM10, like, we know that sea spray also includes a large fraction, because you can see part of it and your face gets part of it. Yeah. And so that's contributing to PM10 as well. And some fraction of that also is small enough to be in the PM2.5. And so I apologize for how we distinguish these things. You'd really like to know how many particles at each size differently, but these are the groups that have been defined by regulation as well as by science over the years.
No, and I know you guys are all working hard. I mean, on every side of this issue, we're working hard on it, and I don't want to, discredit anybody on that. So then the last thing I have is just a real simple question. What are the classifications as far as actually being detrimental to someone's health? What's PM10 versus PM2.5? Which one's more dangerous to a person with respiratory issues?
So the best evidence that we have is that PM2.5 is much more harmful than PM10. And the simple reasoning behind that is what I showed in the complicated figure, that most of the stuff bigger than 2.5 micron gets stuck in your nose, where your mucus actually captures it, and when you blow your nose, it comes right out, instead of making it into your bloodstream and your brain and your lungs, where it is harmful. And so that's our built-in mechanism for getting rid of a lot of the big stuff. And there's and in fact the current research, the PM 2.5 standard is based on what we had in the 1960s to build air quality laws from, but now we actually think that stuff even smaller than 1 micron or 1/10 of a micron is the stuff that's most harmful to us. And so
Right.
does that?
Yeah, no, that answers my question, and also I think I'm going to try to keep my mouth closed as much as possible when I'm riding my dirt bike from now on. So, anyway.
Or wear a mask.
Right. Well, thank you for your guys' time. I appreciate everyone, and I'll move on to the next commissioners.